Now, here on Radio 3 at this moment, it's nearly 5 to 7, when you can hear another program in our series, Organ Gallery. And now here's another program in our series, Organ Gallery, which this evening features the organ of Beverley, Minster, and the organist Alan Spedding. We shall be including a record of Alan Spedding, and we're also going to hear him in conversation with John Lade, who introduces the program.
As usual, we're going to start the program with some music to give you a quick impression of the organ at Beverley. Alan Spedding, the young London-born organist of the Minster, is playing a very short dialogue by the 16th century Italian composer Adriano Banchieri. A dialogue by Banchieri played at Beverley by Alan Spedding. I must admit straight away that Beverley Minster came as a complete surprise to me. I'd never before been in this particular corner of Yorkshire's East Riding, and I shan't easily forget seeing the Minster for the first time as I came into the town on the train from Hull. Its elegant, perfectly proportioned western towers standing sentinel, as the guidebook says, above the red roofs of the medieval town. The Minster, with its huge nave, is still a parish church, by the way, and it's without doubt one of the most splendid Gothic buildings, not only in this country, but anywhere in Europe. As we shall hear in a moment, the organ contains pipes from the Schnetzler instrument of 1769, and we shall be talking quite a lot about John Schnetzler. He came to England from Germany fairly early in the 18th century and settled here to build many fine organs in different parts of the country. And now it's time to climb the rather curious spiral staircase to the organ loft on the screen at Beverley Minster and to meet Alan Spedding. You're having a special celebration here in Beverley this year, I believe.
Yes, we are. We're celebrating the 400th anniversary of the granting of the Elizabethan Charter to the town in 1573.
But the church was much earlier than that, of course, wasn't it?
Yes, the church was started in 1220. This present building is the fourth on the site, and it took 200 years to complete. The west towers are early 15th century.
The thing that strikes me at once is what a tremendous variety of music you're able to play on this organ. That piece by Banchieri dates from the late 16th or early 17th century and sounds very stylish, but so do, for example, the Spedding and the 20th century pieces we're going to hear later on. But we'll come back to all that in a moment. First of all, considering the age of this very beautiful building, it seems odd that the earliest reference to an organ here is as late as 1769.
Yes, it's not only odd, it's extremely frustrating. The establishment of the monastery here allowed for a full complement of musicians, and in the Middle Ages, the Guild of Musicians in Beverley attracted members from all over the north of England. There are many medieval stone carvings of musicians playing contemporary instruments in this building. There are, for example, rebecks and shawms and bagpipes and even portative organs. Music must have played a big part in the life of this church. There is a hazy medieval sketch of what appears to be an organ at ground level, just inside the choir on the north side, and there is a record of a redundancy payment made to an organ player at the time of the dissolution of the monastery. But apart from one other reference to a pair of organs on the screen which was taken down before 1769, we draw a complete blank.
Well, the oldest part of this organ was built by Schnetzler. That was in 1769, was it?
Yes, that's so. John Schnetzler's organ was opened with a great Handel festival in September 1769. The organ stood on a Doric choir screen by Hawksmoor, and the original case now masks the swell and solo boxes over the doorway to the south choir aisle. The organ remained untouched until 1848, when Forster and Andrews of Hull added a set of open wood pedal pipes. The first major rebuild was undertaken by Hill and Son in 1885. Hill retained 21 of the 26 original stops and added a fourth, solo manual, and a pedal department of 8 stops. There was a fine new screen carved by a local craftsman and former mayor of Beverley, but there was no organ case in 1885. There was only a row of display pipes, very bare looking, arranged like a row of decorated pencils. But at the next rebuild in 1916, Dr. Arthur Hill's magnificent case was erected in its present position where we see it now. Apart from an overhaul in 1935, the organ waited until 1962 for further attention. Then a new console was provided, 3 new stops were added, and a set of Schnetzler pipes which had been lying in a box up in the roof, up there, were incorporated as the 4-foot choir principle, bringing the number of Schnetzler stops still in use to 15. Throughout its history, this organ seems to have been allowed to fall into almost total disrepair before being restored. Before the 1885 rebuild, for example, someone narrowly missed being impaled by an organ pipe, which fell out of the case. And again, before 1962, the organ was held together by pieces of string and sellotape. The ironical thing is that people have always been ready to compare the quality of the rebuild unfavourably with what was there before. Arthur Hill had to silence critics in 1916 when they asked, "What has become of our lovely old Schnetzler pipework?" by remarking that if they'd cared about their lovely old Schnetzler pipework, they wouldn't have allowed it to get into such a state.
The instrument as we see it now, then, is 11 years old. There's no sellotape, so far as I can see. How long have you been here?
I came here in January 1967, and I'm the 11th organist since 1769. My predecessors include Dr. A.H. Mann, Daddy Mann of King's College, Cambridge, who left here in 1876. He started the custom which we still observe of going up the towers on Easter Day in the morning to sing music. We think of him with gritted teeth as we stand there in the sleet.
What do you sing?
Oh, Easter music. We tend to hold a choir practice up there, actually. It's rather convenient because I don't think very many people can actually hear what we're doing. Dr. H.K. Andrews was also here in the 1930s before moving on to New College, Oxford.
From where you're sitting at the console on the screen, do you mind just giving us a short description of the organ?
Yes, the player sits at the north side of the organ case, facing southwards. Above me as I sit here, in the main case, are the complete grate and choir departments. Freestanding on the opposite south side of the screen are the solo tubas. And then immediately across in the south choir aisle, on a level with the console, is the swell box. It has shutters opening into the chancel and into the nave. And above and beyond that is the solo box. The pedal department ranges along the south choir aisle behind the choir stalls, with the upper work on a level with me at the west end of that aisle.
Must make the pedal rather difficult to hear, surely, from the nave.
There is a difficulty in the nave. The pedal tends to come in behind the rest of the organ, the further back you sit.
How many of the stops still derive from Schnetzler?
We have 15 of Schnetzler's original stops and parts of 2 others.
And I see you've got a quite exceptionally large pedal department. Does it involve any extension?
There is a little extension on the pedal. The 32-foot reed extends from the 16-foot reed, and the tubas 16, 8 and 4 are extensions from the solo organ. The 32-foot open diapason is also extended from the open diapason 16-foot, number 1.
How many stops are there altogether?
There are 70 altogether.
Spread over the 4 manuals?
Yes, spread over 4 manuals.
And how many on the pedal?
20 altogether, with the extensions which we've mentioned.
Now, coming back to Schnetzler, do you think we could hear a few of his stops?
Yes, certainly. The strength of the Schnetzler stops, of course, is the quality of the soft sounds that you can get. The first one I'd like to show you is the open diapason number 4 on the grate, which to my mind has a most beautiful quality to it. It's a very subtle sounding stop. And then there's the great 8-foot stop diapason, which again has a beautiful quality to it. There are 2 or 3 stop diapasons of very similar quality on this organ. This is the great one. I mentioned just now that there is only one remaining reed, and that's the swell oboe. It sounds a little antique now, but here is the swell oboe. And then finally, the strength of the great organ is the Schnetzler foundation, and here's the sound of the remaining full Schnetzler grate.
I then asked Alan Spedding at Beverley what pleased him most among the stops that have been added later.
Well, as I said, Schnetzler had the last word as far as the soft flutes and diapasons are concerned. Hill's main contribution was the reeds, I think. The swell 16-foot reed is a favourite of mine because of its versatility. It provides a good foundation to the swell, but it's also very useful at 8-foot pitch. Here it is as a solo stop. The great reeds of 1885 are also very fine, especially the 4-foot, the clarion, played at 8-foot pitch, something like this. The pedal cor anglais 4-foot is a useful stop. It provides quite a lot of bite in the pedal department, but it's also very useful as a solo stop. Here it is used in a Walter chorale prelude. The tubas, of course, are very fine in the building, used sparingly anyway.
Coming now to your record, there's a piece by Matthias Horden, in which you use the Schnetzler stops. I'd never heard of Horden, but I think he was a predecessor of yours here.
Yes, he was. Matthias Horden was appointed while the Schnetzler organ was being built. He came from Holy Trinity, Hull, and he was described by the precentor of York, who wrote his reference, as fully qualified for such a place as the Minster, having seldom heard a better parochial player. He went to Newcastle in 1777 as organist, but he must have come back to Beverley because he's buried in the Minster churchyard. His piece comes from a set of voluntaries entitled The Opening of an Organ. As this would appear to be the only new organ Horden had anything to do with, we assume that the title refers to this organ.
that's an excellent example of how 18th century music can sound here at Beverley, a voluntary by Matthias Horden. Let's go back in time now to Spedding, the variations on My Young Life Cometh to Its End. You manage a lot of variety here, but at the same time you avoid, as it were, inflating the sound, yet each variation has its own very distinct identity.
Yes, I've tried to demonstrate what can be achieved in this respect by limiting the registration. There are never more than 3 stops sounding together during these variations, although I play some of them in different registers. For example, the lead at the beginning is played over on the choir 4-foot flute, the Schnetzler flute that is, but at 8-foot pitch, because this gave me the color I wanted. And variation 5 is played on the great 16-foot with the 4-foot flute, together with the tierce from the choir, all up an octave, which gives it that bell-like quality. And there are other examples of this.
Spedding's variations on My Young Life Cometh to Its End. We're going to hear next Bach's chorale prelude on Nun komm der Heiden Heiland, Come Thou Saviour of the Gentiles, BWV 659. Do you find Bach goes well here, or do you have trouble with reverberation?
Well, without the output of Bach, I feel the organ wouldn't be worth playing, of course. Reverberation is a problem here, as is the fact that the pedal sounds late to listeners in the nave, owing to its position eastward of the main case over there. By choosing the right stops, one can play Bach as effectively as anything else. But a lot depends on where one sits in the building. The nearer to the organ, the better for clarity. When we were making this recording, we had great fun trying to find the best place for putting the microphones. We even had the central boss out of the roof at one point. It's lifted up by a treadmill up in the tower, you know, and we lowered a microphone down in front of the case. We got a reasonably good sound until we tried to use the tubas. They simply obliterated everything.
Bach's chorale prelude on Nun komm der Heiden Heiland. And now, a quite big jump in time for another piece based on a chorale, Garth Edmondson's Toccata Prelude on Vom Himmel hoch. You get around a bit on your record. We've already heard music from Italy, Beverley itself, Holland and Germany, and now we move across the Atlantic.
Yes, I must admit that I saw this record as an opportunity of showing just how versatile this organ is. After all, it's never been on disc before, as far as I know, and so I included music from Renaissance to modern and from 8 different countries. The possibilities of the organ are far from exhausted. For example, there's no 19th century music, and there's no modern French.
Edmondson's Toccata Prelude on Vom Himmel hoch. This next piece shows a completely different aspect of this Beverley organ. It's a saeta, the unaccompanied processional song of the Andalusian gypsies, I suppose for the most part traditional, but this one was composed by Eduardo Torres. Who was he, do you know?
Yes, Father Torres was born in 1872, and he became choir master of the cathedral in Seville. He must have had many opportunities of hearing the gypsies improvise these saetas, and this obviously inspired him to write this particular piece. He died in the 1930s.
Saeta 4 by the Spanish composer Torres. The next piece, Ceremonies by Anthony Hedges, was written specially for you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Anthony Hedges is a local resident. He's also the chairman of the Composers Guild of Great Britain, and he wrote this piece about a month before the recording was made. I've tried to use stops in this piece which aren't used in the other pieces, and this was the purpose of including it on the record.
Ceremonies by Anthony Hedges. Well, as you explained just now, when you chose the pieces for your record, you had special reasons for each one of them. What was the reason for this next piece we're going to hear, Hermann Schroeder's Prelude and Fugue?
I chose the Schroeder piece to show off the nobility of the full grate and pedal departments, with and without their reeds. And in the fugue, I also give the organ a build-up, which is something I don't do in any of the other pieces. It's a neo-Bachian piece, and it has a certain clarity of line, which I like very much. And the endings of both the prelude and the fugue, I feel, are magnificent climaxes.
The Prelude and Fugue, based on the Easter Chorale, Christ Lay in Death's Dark Prison, by Hermann Schroeder. And now we come to the last piece. It's the Toccata, Opus 11, by Sark. This has become very popular with recitalists, but I've never heard anything else by Sark, have you?
I've often looked down lists of music for music by Sark, but I'm afraid I've come across nothing else. This piece is certainly great fun to play.
That Toccata Primi Tone, Opus 11, by the Danish composer Einar Trerup Sark, played by Alan Spedding at Beverley, Minster, ends this program in our gramophone series Organ Gallery. The producer was John Lade, who also introduced the program. In our next program, on June the 16th, we shall pay a visit to the organ of Saint-Jacques du Haut-Pas in Paris.